welcome back to the Get Even podcast. It's Ellen and Nora, the co-founders of Even, which is the place for women's careers, their lives, their careers, and their leadership. If you're new to our podcast, Get Even is where we dig into the real stories, the challenges, the breakthroughs, shaping the careers of successful women. And it's where we share practical strategies and insights to help you move forward on your own terms.
And in today's episode, we're talking about leadership because it's one of the biggest themes that we're hearing from women across the Even platform. Whether it's about stepping up for the first time, sometimes it's juggling ambition with family life, or navigating bias at work. We hear about how exciting leadership feels, but also how it can be overwhelming.
So today we're going to share the leadership lessons that we wish we'd known just that bit earlier, the things we'd learned the hard way through our own first promotions, tough feedback, and those identity shifts that can feel like they happen when you step into leadership. We're also going to dissect a listener's leadership and career dilemma, one of those balancing acts that I think so many of us experience.
If you're stepping into leadership or you're thinking about it and trying to get ready, we hope our conversation today gives you clarity, it gives you confidence, and a few of the shortcuts that Ellen and I didn't have when we started. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Get Even podcast. Today, it's Nora and Ellen. Hi, everyone.
Hi. So let's get into it, Nora.
This episode, actually, as we're recording, it coincides with our fourth intake in the Even platform has just gone live within a year. And it's been super interesting, hasn't it? Just to get to know the new women who've joined us, understand what's on their mind, understand some of their aspirations. And I think it's quite relevant to the topic that we're going to chat about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's focus on leadership, focus on women in leadership, which for me is a little bit of feels a bit barbed. Do women need to have a different type of leadership development? Something I tussle with every single day is all the dynamics that go on at work, right? That there's all these different places that bias can really appear. And also if you're in a workplace that doesn't have any women that you could go, oh, that's a good way to do it. I could do that. It can be difficult to kind of define what your leadership can look like as a woman. And that's what we hear from our Even members. And it's not even just within a workplace. It's not like it's just all workplaces' fault. You think about all the different examples of success that you can think of or that are put out there in the media. Typically, they don't involve like these incredible women. It's all about these tech bro dudes who wake up at 4 a.m. and they've already done 7 hours of work before all the rest of us have even woken up, and they've had their protein shakes and then they're off, and they just have no responsibilities whatsoever, and that is successful, right? And that it's how do you define your leadership as a woman if you can't go to clear examples?
Yeah.
And there's just lead you to believe that the capabilities you have as a woman, that actually statistically you're more likely to have the capabilities of a leader as a woman, but you don't see that out there. And so therefore you start questioning whether you're right to be a leader.
Well, let's flip some of those today. And I want to dig into what can we do when you start to question yourself, because as you said, what you're faced with out there is just a different image. And there's so much that life and organizations and perceptions that are thrown at you that does sometimes make you kind of wonder, what is my place in this as a woman? But from women who are joining Even, a couple of the things that we're hearing about right now are things like, I'm ambitious and I want to step up, but I'm not quite sure how. Or it could be, actually, can I have it all? It could be I'm trying to juggle a lot of things that are on my plate. Is it possible? Maybe they're not seeing the examples that you've talked about out there of role models. And yeah, so let's actually, I think you've brought a concrete listener example today. Let's start with that and then get into leadership from there.
Yeah, so like we've got one here, which is professionally, I feel like there are challenges to progress in my career. It feels like you need to give up one, most of them being family life, in order to get the other at times. So, how can I progress my career and my leadership without losing time with the kids?
How can I progress my career and my leadership without losing time with the kids?
And I think there's a lot to unpack in that, right? Because I think there's an assumption there that time will be lost with the kids if the career is progressed.
Yeah.
You increase your leadership responsibility.
So is that the first thing you would say to the listener is what's the assumption?
Yeah, and it also kind of it's those metrics of success that someone has for themselves. It's what success does look like for them. Do they understand success in the traditional way? Is there a broader view of success? And I also kind of go with that question is kind of what kind of role are they in as well? So, Claudia Golden has that idea of greedy work, where the type of work, so greedy work, greedy roles, things like in law or consulting, private equity, finance, where if you do twice the amount of hours, you're going to make way more than twice the amount of money. And if it's that type of role, that is a different kind of idea of what a career and life balance would be compared to something that might be not quite a greedy role. So that's what comes up for me there.
Would agree with that as well. I think the context here is quite important. So are you in an environment, as you said, where it's a greedy role or it's a greedy type of environment or sector? The other thing is also just looking around you, to kind of go, what environment am I in? Am I in an environment where it's actually normalized to be able to combine career and caring? Do I see people around me doing this and can I ask them for help? Can they share with me how they're doing it? Or am I actually finding myself in an environment where it seems like I'm the first person to ever tackle this challenge? And I mean, that kind of tells you something in itself as well. And then I would also say, look at the environment that you have going on around you, whether that's at home or, within your family or within your network of friends. Like, what are the assumptions there again? Because having that question of how can I juggle career and step up while having time for family, are you actually from a family environment where the default or the assumption is that you're going to be the one juggling? Are you in a partnership at home where the assumption is you're going to be the one carrying the burden or the largest share of the burden? I think that's kind of important. Have you had that conversation with your partner about how you're going to tackle family if you both want a family? So I think that's really important. It's not just that you have to figure this all out by yourself, but you do exist within a larger context of your partnership, your family, your friend group, your organizational environment as well.
And then I guess it's the thing that I know lots of smart women also go is like, okay, so that's everything that's going on around me, but I'm someone who gets something done.
Are you like that?
I think we both are. I think we know a lot of women who are like that as well. And they will also go, well, this is a really hard decision for me and I can't seem to be able to make it. And I'm actually usually quite good at making decisions. And so I think a lot of people also go out there. So what can I do?
Mm.
And so the other thing that comes up for me is that we know when our members start defining those boundaries for themselves. So I think last time we talked about values, and so that's a form of it, like what's important to you, but also what are those boundaries for you, and where can you have more control over some of those boundaries, uh, and maybe others that you can't. And so that was leading me to think about it in the sense of what our lives look like now when we're running a business. And there's two important things for me in regards to boundaries. I want to be really productive
Mhm.
and I want to be the most productive at the times I can be most productive. But then I want really high value time with my kids. So not the time where you're like, come on, let's get out the door, get dressed, that type of
Oh.
More when you're kind of going, "Okay, let's have some fun. Let's play a game where you're playing with them and you're on their time." And that's the balance I'm actually trying to get, not so much the balance between work and life. It's being a little bit more granular, and if I can kind of balance those things out, then I feel better in myself.
I find the same, and I think maybe another thing that we could ask our listener here is when she's saying, you know, how can I balance it? How can I still have time with family? I think sometimes we think of time in kind of absolutes, or we think of, you know, that we must spend the same amount of time at home, same amount of time at work, or even that we must be constantly available as a parent in order to be a good parent. Or on the flip side, we might be thinking we have to be constantly available, as is the case in those greedy jobs, in order to be successful at work. And it's actually about high value time. It's about being fully present when you're there. So I think sometimes that moment when you're playing a game with your kids and like you're enjoying yourself, you're not on your phone, you're not multitasking, they're kind of laughing with you. They're, you know, they love your attention, your full presence. That is, you're actually creating a memory there. And that's more important than, you know, being there kind of 24 hours a day. The people who matter most actually get what they really need, which is my presence, but it's high value presence. It's not constant availability while I'm doing everything else.
Yeah, it's kind of turning the "I can't" to the "I won't."
Yeah,
What are your non-negotiables? Like, I won't diminish my ambition because of this assumed imbalance that I think will occur.
I
Or
love that. I can't to I won't.
yeah, there's more choice and agency to an "I won't" than "I can't."
Like you said, it's bringing it back to agency and the choices that we make and feeling empowered. I think that's the thing is what would help our listener here to feel empowered that she is driving the choices and that she's making them on terms that she can be happy with.
Yeah. And look, it's a lot it's a challenge that I experience, but it's a challenge that a lot of our members experience. And I guess the reason I'm bringing up those pieces that I've identified is that we do know that that actually works for people.
Yeah.
Those actions really work for people and they feel more in control. They feel like they've got the balance that they want by taking kind of those steps. And so, whilst society definitely needs to change, it's taking way too long and it's not good enough ever until it's even. But at the same time, there are still things we can do.
Okay. I love your impatience always.
Okay, so that's a user's story. That's a yeah, like that's what's happening for someone now. But we can't just come in and talk about everyone else's stuff without talking about our own. And I think it'd be great to just explore some of those pieces that I guess we wish we had have known. We worked with like over 15,000 different leaders and we went through the leadership journey ourselves.
Mm.
What is this stuff that, when you look back, I wish I would have, X. I think it's a nice exercise to do because you realize I did learn a lot as well.
Yeah, and I think others can learn from that and maybe not repeat some of the mistakes that we made. Helen, so let's okay, I want to actually know, I don't think I've ever heard the story, but tell me about your first step up into leadership. What was that like?
Unexpected. Like it was tied to winning work. And so it was tied to profit and revenue. And I wanted to win that work. And so with that then came more responsibility and there was no one else to do it apart from myself. And so it was like, okay, cool. We won the project. Let's go. So I was like, oh, okay. I haven't really thought this through. Not in a bad way, but more that I was taking what you gets termed as technical skills
Yeah.
and achievement focus.
Yeah.
And then that landed me in a leadership role.
And then what happened then? So you had people that all of a sudden you had to approve leave requests and things like that?
Like this whole admin world opened up, whilst at the same time, all those different things you need in regards to management. So like you're not one of the team, you're leading the team. You're not part of the team that's responsible for the results and accountable for the results. You are the person who needs to explain above and below what the results are and why you're going for them. And so it was a live action experience, how to be a first time leader. What about yourself? What was your story?
Yeah, also unexpected. And I think maybe this is a common theme for high performers and high performing women in particular, but it's that theme of like, there was nobody else there. So I just stepped in, or you just stepped into that role. Same, there was, for me, it was my boss went on parental leave and they had been unsuccessful in finding a replacement for her. And so somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We want you to go for it. There's nobody else. Basically, will you go for it?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. That sounds awful."
So then what did they convince you with?
It really required a big identity transition because I went from being early career, like 2 years into kind of full time work, to leading over 30 people and with no preparation. And it was such a baptism of fire because it was in an academic context. So it meant my identity had to go from I am the one producing work, so research, producing teaching, to actually managing work and leading others in that. So there was just so many big learnings at the beginning.
What were some of the things that were what were some of the things that were the moments that really helped learn quick?
So, I don't think I was prepared for some of what was to come just by virtue of being a leader in an academic setting where I think it's just an environment that doesn't like the concept of leadership. It's a very individualistic environment. So I didn't realize how hard it was going to be. And then there was the other things that happened by virtue of me being the youngest, a woman, and then leading people who were sort of 20, 30 years my senior. So I had experiences where I assigned projects to certain staff members and I found that I was publicly shouted at, berated for how dare you assign me work. I was like, well, it's literally my job to assign you work, but thank you. Or another example was somebody basically saying, I can't wait for our boss to get back from parental leave, just saying it right in my face. I was like, yeah, neither can I. But thanks again. Thanks for the feedback.
But at least you knew where they stood.
It was just, it's one of those where you learn very quickly how to hold yourself. And you also learn that being a good leader is not about people loving everything you do. It's not about being popular. It's actually about sometimes making calls that people aren't going to like, but you're doing them because you have an organization's interest at heart. But yeah, what about you? What were some of those pieces of feedback that stung for you?
For me, the bits that stung for me would be when I knew how hard the team was working to get somewhere and someone would criticize their results. And so it was hard to hear that personally because I knew how much effort was going in for the team to get something. And then I was thinking also that I was worrying how to have to interpret that feedback and feed it back to the team when really yes, you can tweak it a little bit, especially if it's incredibly harsh. But at the same time, there's still a respect from sharing that feedback and it actually can motivate a team as well. But that was one of the harder pieces is that because I'd been a member of the team and I knew how feedback like that could be. That was one of the harder moments, and I would receive a lot of that because what we were doing was in a completely new area. There was a lot of fear around this new area we were taking the business, and a lot of unknown. And so I had a lot of people's anxieties and worries coming to me, and I was
Mm.
acting as a filter for the top and the managers at the top and the people who were getting the work done.
So with those kind of carrying people's anxieties or shouldering some of the burdens, is there anything that you wish now looking back that you'd had a mentor or like a coach at the time who could have said something quite powerful to you that you know now?
Yeah, so it sounds like strange, and I don't mean it in a selfish way, but it's about put yourself first. So I was acting in service of everyone else, and I hadn't taken that time to go, why do I want this role? What do I bring to this role? Where's this role going to get me? I was still in the mindset of like, we've got to achieve these results. We've got to do everything at all costs. Um, and so I was at the bottom of that list. I'll get to me once I've got to everything else. And really, it was only when I could start putting myself first, not in a selfish way, but, health, mental health as well, my time, my boundaries, knowing what value I was bringing to the team and what I could bring to the organization. If I'd done that and stayed true to that, I think I could have probably had a bit of an easier journey.
I think similarly was very focused on task.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that now, with the benefit of having educated these thousands of leaders and having this community that's growing with even, I think that's the most common thing we see now as well. Is I think people forget to use that moment of stepping up for the first time as an inflection point to go, like you said, what do I actually want from this role? Why do I want it? And how am I going to show up to it? And instead what we see is just that pressure to perform, that pressure to execute to perfection, because often that is what's gotten you to that promotion, but it's actually not what's going to help you to be sustainable and really sort of thriving and a high performing leader going forward.
Yeah. It's a strange one, I think, for women, because I think we have to constantly prove that we are competent in the role. And so you do always have to be good at stuff. You have to do it. And you are going to be judged more harshly. And then on top of it, you've also got to make sure that you have to be more self aware um, and focus on yourself as well. Like, it is a bit ridiculous that there are all these different pieces going on.
Yeah, actually, can I expand on that? Because I think there's something else that's actually kind of beautiful if you pay attention to it as a leader, in that you get insight into what goes on in an organization as a leader. So you get to see what direct reports want and need and ask for. And also, you have more access to people that are your peers. You have more access to people that are more senior to you. And I actually think there's a few moments of discovery, at least for me, that I found through that process that really helped me to put to bed some of those ridiculous standards for women. So before stepping up and before having that level of insight, I definitely held a ridiculous bar for myself about performance. When you dig into what people ask for in terms of compensation or just anything extra, or when you see how far some people stretch the kind of patience of an organization with things like sick leave, and you come to this role with this sort of standard of perfection for yourself, and you actually see what is going on around you. For me, it was a real awakening to go, my insight now is always ask for more, like never ever accept a promotion or even just a job offer without negotiating, asking for more, because I've seen it on the other side and I've seen how common it is. And say no more. Before my first promotion, I would always, discretionary effort. Can you come to something at the weekend? Can you put in extra time? I'd always say yes to everything. And I didn't realize just how much power I had.
So what was the realization? Because I'm sure you didn't have that realization when you first moved into your leadership role. Like, what was it that opened when you could see within those organizations? Was that one of the eye-opening elements of it?
The benefit of being a leader is that organizational insight, right? You have exposure to senior leaders, you have exposure to other leaders at your level. And I think that was a real awakening again when I started to participate in senior leader meetings and I saw, sorry to say this, but I saw male peers putting in like no prep, like no background work, and saw how they organized their own teams. And I kind of went, "Yeah, I think I've got this."
I mean, it's really, really nice that you had um, that belief in yourself to kind of see what others were doing and to go, no, you've got this. But I don't think that happens for everyone. And I don't think that happens for every woman. And so I think it's something, like, it is an inner confidence in you. And I know you, I
But
know.
I did not have it before stepping up. So I I never, until I first got promoted, I never negotiated salary because I always just thought, oh, how lucky am I to be offered this role? Whereas now I would just never. But so it wasn't just I was born with it. Like I actually did have to go through that and have those moments where you're just faced with hard data and observational insight. So
Also, if you hadn't gone from maybe like 0 to 30 people and it had maybe been 1 to 4 people that you've been managing, it might have been a longer trajectory for you to get
Sure.
there. Yeah?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
sure.
you did get to see at a certain level
Yeah. Very
something
quickly.
really quite different
Yeah.
by jumping in that way. And so I think so therefore like the insight is that even like if you are managing 1 to 4 people, well when you get up there, that's the insight you could have. So you have it now. Have that insight now. Yeah, because it is a bit shocking when you see, maybe others who have done it for 20 years longer than you, and you're kind of maybe a peer of theirs, but they might be getting paid X amount more than you.
Yeah. What
And
about you?
it's
Did you have any of those moments of discovery?
there was one. No, I can't share.
You can't put this in a podcast. All right, cut, cut, cut.
So we talked about some insights for, as a first time leader, but like what's a leadership skill you wish you had developed earlier? What is one that you would have started practicing earlier? Like what's a hack? What's a shortcut?
Yeah. And I'm like, I love actually sharing this with our members now when they ask or when we see that they're preparing for that first step up. So like we were both saying earlier, we were very performance, very task focused. And I thought my role as a leader was to make sure that we hit our objectives, we hit our goals, and that was like no matter what. Whereas the skill that I actually needed to develop was my people leadership skill. And that was literally just the skill of like spending time with people and making time understanding what's your lived reality, what's going on for you, what do you care about? What do you value about this work? And then how can I think about how I tie that into the kind of work that we take on as a team? How can I best understand what you care about to then also help to inform you about organizational context and goal, because that's my role as a leader, is to create that connection between you as a team member and what the overall organization is trying to achieve. So it's really just a skill of sitting with people, asking good questions, listening to them, that I needed to develop, and it took me a lot of time. I remember that the next promotion after that first one, there was a panel of senior leaders that interviewed me for that next promotion, and they actually said to me, "We're concerned about your lack of warmth for this next step up. You've got all of the other things that you need for this role in terms of strategy and understanding the context, but we're concerned about that." And that was a bit of a that was an eye-opening moment. That it wasn't just a nice to have. That's actually your role as a leader, is you just sit with people.
And so it's interesting they framed it as warmth.
Yeah, that's very gendered. Because a man would not have had that comment. And there's an expectation for sure when you're a woman that you show up in a gendered behavioral norm. And I'm a lot of times, my style is not in that gendered norm. And I found a way to work through that and to call it out when I see it as explicitly biased. But despite that, there was some truth to, what's behind that word. What about you? So what is a leadership skill that you wish that you'd really figured out earlier, and that would have helped you to get to great performance as a leader sooner?
It was like I used to pride myself on my operational network. So kind of I knew all the workarounds within the organization. I knew how to get everything done really, really fast. And I just spent too much time there. And
Mm.
it was when I started opening up my network. So people outside of the organization, people who just pinged my interest for some reason, and reaching out and talking to them. And even if it was just more from an inspirational perspective, or, gosh, you do something completely different, it's just invigorating. When I did that, it gave me a lot of energy, but it also gave me a lot of opportunity, an opportunity to see strategy in a different way, an opportunity to see my career in a different way. And I really could have started doing that a lot earlier than I did. I could have been doing that from the first moment I was in a management role, and I could have solved other problems with a broader network. There was a period for me where I was like, am I in the right place? And I think I could have answered that question quicker with a broader network, with more examples at play, with informal mentors. Like that is a skill that I really could have evolved quicker. Yeah.
That's a pretty profound insight. If you were to flip that onto forward looking advice for our community, what would you say to them?
That skill, that kind of, you'll hear people go, I'm just so busy. There is so much on my plate. I really know I need to build my relationships, but I just don't have time. And you're going to have to find that time. Something is going to have to fall in the other deliverables because it's a transformative piece having those relationships, and it is never wasted effort. It's important. And so then for me, I go, well, like, how could you do it in a small way to start? Like, how could you just have a 15-minute catch up? Or like, could you reach out to someone on LinkedIn? So maybe they don't even get back to you, but you've put that effort in. Yeah, relationships outside of your organization as well as relationships within your organization are critical, and they should never be minimized ever.
And what about, I'm thinking about like, let's really build the toolkit for our community who are going through that transition for the very first time. What are some of the basics that you think will really help them becoming leader for the first time?
Weird thing about like hiring and firing, like like there's
Mm,
probably a better way to say it, but all that stuff feels quite intimidating to do it for the first time. And you're like, am I doing it right? Am I not doing it right? What am I supposed to say? What am I not supposed to say? And you usually have someone from HR supporting you, but that would be an area just to maybe swat up on and have some questions for HR when you become a manager to start so that you're not dealing with it in the moment.
I love that. I was actually reminded of that. So yesterday when you and I had lunch in the city together, I think right next to us there was a conversation that sounded pretty much like a hiring conversation. Like, I mean, maybe I'm getting this wrong, but I was just cringing the whole time because I could hear the person sort of over promising and just saying all of these wonderful things, and it just led me to like one of the basics of hiring is like you set expectations well so that you don't end up in a whole heap of trouble 3 months down the track when the person's like, what did you promise me? You told me this organization was going to be fantastic. You told me I was going to have all of these amazing responsibilities, and none of that is true. So that's like my top tip for hiring is make sure you set expectations appropriately.
What would be another basic one for you?
Basic one is actually like make time to get the basics right. If you get the basics right, you're so ahead of everyone else. I can't tell you the amount of leaders I've worked with, both in a capacity as a leader within an organization and as somebody advising other companies to develop their leadership. The amount of time I've seen people advance to very senior levels of leadership without actually mastering the basics of being a good leader is it's actually scary. So like you said, do you know how to hire and fire? Do you know how to actually have a basic goal setting conversation? Do you know how to give feedback? Like that actually, that skill, I remember sitting with a coach because I was sugarcoating feedback so bad. So I would give the right messages, but what I never got to is the if then, like, if this continues, what's the actual consequence? So I could say, I'm seeing this pattern here, but I could never say, we're going to actually have to put you on a performance improvement plan, or we're not going to be able to pass your probation. Like, I just really could not get those words out. So can you actually just, try early on to have some support, make sure you read the right material, practice with peers. Like you're going to be so good if you just master some of those leadership basics.
The other one that comes up for me is like your team's rhythm.
Yeah.
I think in some workplaces they're really, really clear. And then in other places, especially maybe if you're a new team, you haven't got those rhythms. And it's better to over index in investing the time in those rhythms. Like, how do you connect to know what work needs to be done? How do you support each other? How do you support each other outside of work? How do you connect online? How do you connect face to face? Having direction from your manager on that can be so helpful. How do you make time for professional development? Is the manager putting an hour or two into their diary for professional development? And can you see that? If you see that, you're going to make time in your diary to do it. So it sounds so basic. It's actually helpful for your team.
So it's things like you're saying it's things like calling out how should you contact me if you're reporting to me? Like, is it going to be on Teams? Is it going to be on my phone? Is it going to be on email? Like, you're basically just making explicit all of those things, like how do we communicate with each other. Is there anything else that we've missed?
The other thing is kind of a team rhythm. So even just like your knowledge management, where are you putting everything? When do Teams channels get set up, or Slack channels? Every single day? No, probably not. Like what's the key things? Like just how are you going to work together, and how are you going to do it in a in-person environment, and how are you going to do it in a digital environment? And you can set those as a manager. Um, and if you don't have all the answers, ask your team. Like your team probably know what they're doing too. So maybe you could actually co-create it together.
That's really good. I mean, again, this is not it's not complicated, but yeah, so many leaders just miss the opportunity, especially when you're coming in new or when team members are coming in and new. It's just such a great opportunity to think about that with intention. And rather than, I think, we can go with the default of, oh, the team's always had a weekly meeting that's an hour long and it's at 8:30 on a Monday morning, therefore it should always be then. So it's a great opportunity to actually go, well, what are our team rhythms and what are we putting in place?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. We're at the end of our conversation. We're going to wrap on a quick question, which is, Ellen, what's the best bit of leadership advice that you can give to others?
Don't doubt yourself ever.
Kind of like, I mean, a bit of self awareness is good too.
No, and like that, absolutely. Self-awareness is of key, but it's if you have that kind of benchmark of, okay, well, why am I doubting myself? Or maybe I shouldn't here. Like you can listen to feedback, you can have that self-awareness, you can ask those questions, but I just wouldn't class it as doubt. I think we class it as doubt. Like you there's that inner narrative that goes, am I like I must be the problem. All right. Take that as one source of insight. What's yours?
Like, you're free to make mistakes,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and you're going to get better as a leader. So you don't, we talked about the bar, don't set the bar ridiculously high. And just when you make a leadership mistake, you go, oh, okay, I'm going to try not to do that again. Okay, probably made 5 mistakes, but also probably got like 15 things right.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like, that's actually completely fine.
So, I mean, we could go on about this forever. Like we've talked about so many basics of leadership that no matter where you are on your leadership journey, you're going to still be thinking about these. And there's some that you will have, and there's some that we're still learning. But I think like what's coming through for me is that it's kind of how you do leadership on your terms. There isn't like a prescribed way of doing it. And as a woman, you can define it, and you can do some really fantastic things if you define what's important for you, what your boundaries are, what your expectations are. Like it can be totally yours.
I love it. All right, everyone. See you next time.